Hey, this is Sam. Welcome to BNS About Movies. This week we're going to talk about disasters. We're going to talk about specifically Nostradamus, or Nostradamusu no Daiogen, which was from 1974.
Hello, listeners. This is the ghost of Carolyn de Fonseca, and I would like to apologize for Sam's pronunciations. He can barely speak English, much less Japanese. And now, back to the show.
In 1969, Tsutomu Ben Goto was writing for women's magazines and watching the moon landing. That's when he remembered reading about man walking on the lunar surface of the moon and within the quatrains of Nostradamus. That is from Century 9, Quatrain 65, he will go into the corners of Luna, where he will be captured and put in a strange land. The unripe fruits will be the subject of great scandal, great blame to one great praise. Okay, Nostradamus isn't really something that you can do a direct translation of, but just go with me on this. Marcel Nostradamus was a French astrologer and physician, but also a seer who wrote Les Prophéties, a collection of 942 quatrains, poetic stanza made up of 4 lines, with one having alternate rhymes that allegedly predicted future events. Writing about being arrested and tortured within the Inquisition, Nostradamus obscured the meaning of his prophecies by using word games in a mixture of other languages such as Greek, Italian, Latin, and Provençal. At the time, people thought Nostradamus was either evil, fake, or insane. After all, if he was so good at predicting the future, why didn't he predict that he'd suffer from the gout? He did have one admirer, and it was Queen Catherine, who believed in him so much that she made him counselor and physician in ordinary to her son, King Charles IX. The Japan of 1974 was gripped in premillennial tension that one has to assume was exacerbated. This country alone had suffered 2 examples of nuclear fire dropped on them over the past century, and here we were, on the precipice of an even more frightening future. Goto's books were perfect for the country's insecurity and vulnerability. This is also when the idea of 1999 started worrying people. After all, major disaster was coming in the last year of the millennium. Even though the millennium didn't end until the year 2000, the book said that Japan would suffer an oil crisis, a trade war with America, a devalued yen, the rise and fall of real estate in Tokyo, volcanoes, and earthquakes. By predictions of Nostradamus' Middle East chapter in 1991, Goto had written 7 books on the subject. He would eventually write 10. He had sold 5.4 million books, even if critics said his work was Nostradamasu, which uses the Japanese word damasu, which means to deceive. Meanwhile, Toho was airing the end of Godzilla's Heisei era and was looking for something new to get moviegoers in the theater. They'd already followed Hollywood's disaster movie template to make Japan Sinks, which was the most popular movie in the country both in 1973 and 74, making double what its closest competitor did. It was so successful that Roger Corman and New World Pictures bought the rights, edited and learned green, and released it in our country as Tidal Wave. Well, for this movie, Toho took a glance at a book written by Shinya Nishimura, general manager of the Food General Office within the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, and Goto that saw a dismal future filled with no food and environment that began to turn against humanity. It's written by Yoshimitsu Banno, who made the apocalyptic Godzilla vs. Hedorah, or in America, Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, and Toshiro Masuda, who directed Tora 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 about Japanese and naval conflict, as well as Be Forever Yamamoto, which is an anime that has a Japanese battleship rising to space, along with help from Toshio Yasumi, The Last War. This was all shot on Toho's visual sound stages. This recycles a ton of footage. They didn't have a lot of money at this point. It's got footage from The Last War, Tokyo Sinks, its destruction is from The Return of Godzilla, and the movie Deathquake. In the Japanese cut, there are 6 versions of this movie. The movie gets started in 1853 as Genta Nishimaya begins preaching the prophecies of Nostradamus before he begins to preach that Japan must end its isolation. Killed for heresy, his children hide his book. His family continues to tell others of the prophecies, like a World War II descendant who was interrogated about the defeat of the Axis. But let's get to 1999. Dr. Ryogen Nishiyama has been analyzing all matter of biophenomena, like large mutant bugs, kids getting psychic powers from drinking zinc-heavy water, and ice showing up in Hawaii. Trust me, this movie is decades ahead of Don't Look Up, and a million times more entertaining, as no one believes that natural disaster is about to be unleashed, and things like nuclear clouds in New Guinea will create giant leeches, bats that feel like they came out of a lizard in a woman's skin, and cannibalism. There's also an incredibly dark scene where a fisherman, realizing that the oceans will no longer sustain life again, realizes that he has no purpose, so he walks into the water to die as his sons fight to save him. From catastrophes both large, like SST jets exploding over Japan and unleashing the full power of a hole in the ozone layer, and snow in the Middle East, to small, dying family members of the central cast, making the end of the world personal. This movie takes a downbeat turn quickly, but somehow this is all set to a score that can only be described as transcendent or paradoxical or great. In between all the death and destruction, we learn that the young people have decided to take their fate in their own hands, as they take tons of drugs. They draw a lot and then sacrifice themselves by climbing into the sails of boats, dressed in kabuki makeup, and crashing those boats into each other. They also line up on motorcycles and one after another make a jump into oblivion in the Dead Sea, all set to guitar-driven fuzz rock. By the end of this film, nuclear war breaks out and our entire planet is a desert where mutant humans still kill one another, learning nothing. Then, as if Bobby Ewing had just finished his shower, we learn that this has all been a speech that the doctor was giving to the Japanese Senate. This film ends with this credit: the story that you've just seen was a work of fiction. The events it portrayed, however, may take place in our world. It's up to you to take action and ensure these events do not come to pass. A Japanese version of Prophecies of Nostradamus played Japanese language theaters in the US in 1979 and 1980, while UPA acquired the rights to distribute the film on home video and television. The American version, The Last Days of Planet Earth, was released on VHS and Laserdisc in 1995 by Paramount. There are a ton of differences, with much of the gorier moments taken out, like the cannibals eating one of the scientists, the flesh falling off the arm of a zombified man, an American voiceover for the Regatta of Death, nuclear missiles being launched, the mutants, and a human biting into a snake, amongst many other excised scenes and narration changes. While available for release in the US, it's doubtful that the full movie will be seen here outside of bootlegs. The cannibal scenes in the mutant battle were cut everywhere outside of Japan, and as of 1980, those scenes don't appear in Japan outside of a bootleg, which was released by a Toho employee of a canceled VHS and Laserdisc release from 1988. That film was finally cut down from 114 minutes to 90 minutes thanks to all of the edits. There was a sequel, Prophecies of Nostradamus 2, The Great King of Terror, a film which Goto, analog to Tosomi Goto, would try to reach out to the spirit of Nostradamus to save the world, though Toho did make Nostradamasu Senriso no Keiji in 1994. During filming, there was a pyrotechnical accident that caused a fire that burned down a lot of this soundstage, an apocalyptic event all on its own that destroyed many of the costumes and props from earlier Toho films, including the Mogera costume from the Mysterians. But this isn't the only Nostradamus movie we're here to talk about.
What would you do if you thought you knew the exact day World War III would break out, and who might start it, where it might be fought, and who might be left when it was over? Where would you go? How would you protect your family?
Don't miss the incredible predictions of Nostradamus, the man who saw tomorrow, from Warner Brothers, rated PG.
Robert Gunnett took his experience working for Sun Classics and made The Man Who Saw Tomorrow in 1981, which decimated my childhood with repeat showings on HBO. Seriously, even if I saw a moment of this movie, I would have the worst anxiety attack. Orson Welles hosted this, despite the fact that he didn't believe in it at all. His main objection was his belief that Nostradamus' work was never translated properly. That's because the quatrains of Nostradamus, breaking his work into 4 lines at a time, then collecting them into centuries, which were 100 quatrains at a time, make it difficult to comprehend what he's really saying. Adding to Welles' theories, the political and religious issues of the psychic's time made him hide his predictions in 4 different languages and then code those messages into anagrams. After making this, even Orson Welles publicly made fun of it, even when he was on shows where he was supposed to sell the movie. Was he contractually obligated to make this movie, or was he just the kind of person who didn't care and the filmmakers figured people were going to see it anyway?
I take directions from one person under protest. But from 2, I don't sit still. But who the hell are you, anyway?
The scariest part of this movie for me as a kid was all about the King of Terror, who was said to be the third of the Antichrist who would spread Islam, join with Russia, and nuke New York City. Between this and finding random Jack Chick tracks and the day after, let me tell you, the 80s were not fun at all. Do not believe anything you see on TV.
Nostradamus not only predicts the Third World War, but he even predicts when and where it will begin and who will be fighting. He tells us, too, how long the war will last and who will survive. Well, first we ask, when? In one quatrain, he tells us that the war will begin when the Sun, Mars, and Mercury conjunct in the sign of Aquarius, and this conjunction is an infrequent one. It happens again in 1994. So this could be the year in which the Third World War begins. In another quatrain, he gives us an actual date when the war will be well underway.
In 1988, this movie found another life after theaters and HBO when it became a video rental hit in the wake of the California earthquakes. Roger Ebert reported that sales clerks at the busy 2020 video store on Los Ciengo Boulevard told me the tape is renting like crazy, and the overnight fee has been raised to $6, reflecting the demand. Spokesman for Warner Brothers Home Video claimed that The Man Who Foretold the Future has emerged as a surprise hit from their backlist. It found another life even after that. In 1991, there was a remake of it that aired on NBC with Charlton Heston re-recording Welles' narration, reading almost the same script. However, with it only being an hour long, they still cut out a lot of it, as well as the implication that the third Antichrist was an Islamic leader is implied in the new script that person is Saddam Hussein, and to make it even weirder, all of the end of the world footage is deleted.
He made over 1,000 predictions. There are those who say that over half of them have already come true. He's said to have predicted the assassination of President Kennedy, the rise of the Ayatollah Khomeini, and the coming of the space age, all hundreds of years before they actually happened. He was a respected French physician named Michel de Nostradamus, who died in 1566. The most startling of his predictions deals with the coming of three great despotic tyrants.
But yet this had another comeback after 9/11 when Blockbuster Video, remember that, went nuts renting this movie. There's an article in the Chicago Tribune where a manager of Blockbuster in Chicago reported several requests for the film and said customers have been asking for it like crazy. Regardless, I think you should watch it, if only to listen to one of the greatest geniuses of all time. I'm talking about the Orson Welles version, reduced to being in an exploitation documentary. But hey, anything to finish his films, right? Anyway, you've been listening to BNS About Movies, and hopefully you can see tomorrow a place where you will review this show online. You'll subscribe, you'll tell your friends about it, and more than 30 people will listen to an episode. You can come to the site bnsaboutmovies.com, send me an email at bnsaboutmovies@gmail.com,